if you can lead the club, this angle forms because my wrist hinges now. As my arm leads forward, it hinges. If I keep that angle as I'm leading it, it hits the back of the ball, goes down into the turf slightly, and continues to stay behind my left arm. In my case, my left arm is my lead arm. And when I finish my swing, this angle is still here between my right wrist and the shaft of the club. I never let the club get by my left arm because I'm not pushing it. That would unhinge the hinge. So, if I can lead this club back and through, you see the ball just pops right up in the air quite nicely, because the angle that develops from the hinge allows that club to continue its descending motion down into the back of the ball. Notice how this angle is still here. The club is still behind my lead arm, and if I keep my lead arm leading, even when I get to the finish, the angle is still there. This is critical for not just chip shots, all shots. If you're trying to create maximum power and great contact, this is critical for all shots. There are some specialty shots where you do, believe it or not, the exact opposite. But that's, again, you better have some great pair of hands there and a sense of timing to pull that one off, because that's not the best way to do it, but there are certain shots that works quite well. But for our basic shot, which is what we're discussing right now, I'm always leading the club through. I'm always leading it through. This angle is always there. Does anybody have any questions on that part of it so far? The tricky part here is the less I use my hands and wrists, the more I'm going to need to allow my body to move. This is how a pivot is born. We've talked about this in the past as well. When my arm comes back, once it gets to a certain point, because it's attached to my left shoulder, my shoulder starts to move because of it. So if I swung the club to here, you would see very little pivoting action out of my body. But the farther my lead arm goes back, the more my shoulder will move to accommodate it. And the more my shoulder moves, the more my hips will move, because they're attached to my shoulders through my torso. As my hips start to move, my legs will start to move. This all happens in a beautiful sequence that is totally natural. You shouldn't have to think about turning your body, because you could turn your body all day long and never move the club, because you're holding onto the club with your hands. That's what's attached to it, and they're attached to your arms. So getting control over your arms and hands is vital for you to be a decent player. Hinging allows you to use them very effectively if you allow it to hinge on its own. But when you start pushing the club, you destroy that hinge. In other words, you see how I spin it before I ever got to the ball. So if I come down, I push, then I'm going to blade it. Then I'm going to hit it a mile over the green. It's not going to go in the air, and you're going to feel like, how in the world could this happen? Well, that's how it happens. And nobody who knows would ever tell you, you looked up. You pushed the club and it came up. That's the problem, not looking up. Now, how do you learn this effectively? The first thing I do is I put the ball on a tee for a chip shot, because your number one goal is to lead this club through the ball. Not to hit at the ball, to lead it through. And when you're leading it, you don't want any change in grip pressure or body pressure. Holding the club light, not loose, but light, allows your hands and wrists the freedom along with your arms that they've got to have. It's also important that your shoulders, hips, legs are also relaxed. You don't want them tight. You don't want them like a puddle of jello either. But you don't want them tight, because they need to respond to the flow of your lead arm and hand. So when I swing this club back, all I'm trying to do, swing it more with my arms and just let my arm and hand swing through the ball. Notice where I'm finishing here. I use an analogy of a pendulum. If I start with the club here and I just let my left hand come away and it falls, it's going to almost get to the exact same distance from the bottom to the other side. The reason because it does that is because of gravity. Gravity has a specific pull. If I let this go, it's going to go downhill long enough to build just enough speed to make it to the other side. And it will keep doing that, losing just a little along the way. Otherwise we'd have perpetual motion, no more gasoline wouldn't be needed. We don't have that. But you can think of this from a golfer's standpoint of making your swing even. Think of it as a swing that's even, but your left arm, or lead arm I should say, is the controlling interest. Notice how when my arm comes back, you see my body moving with it. I could do it without it, but what happens the minute I get to here, I'm resisting with my shoulder. It's going to stop the flow of my arm. The minute my arm flow stops, guess what? My hands and wrists might overreact and overhinge. If I hold it soft, when I swing my arm back, you can see there's a little bit of hinging as I go back. Your goal is to not let it unhinge coming through. How you do that? You simply lead your left arm or lead arm through the shot. So, even if I just used one arm, the one arm that I would use would be my left arm, because I wanted to merely just swing back and lead through. That was a lousy shot. Let me try that again. Pay attention this time. Okay, so if I just relax, swing my arm back, allow my body to move, you can see all I'm trying to do is lead this club through the ball. I'm definitely not trying to hit at it. Very important. The focus here is to lead the club through, not hit at the ball. That hitting at the ball is what caused you to push the club from here, and then you lost your angle, and now it's bottoming out too soon, coming up and topping the ball or whatever. Nothing good, I can assure you of that. So, on a tee, feeling your arm swing. A lot of times we can talk about a triangle here. So it's my arm and hand and my shoulder. You see the triangle. Swing my arm back and through. I don't want my hands flipping all over the place. This shot is much better served when you can use your arms to control it rather than your hands. The reason for that is your hands and wrists are your #1 speed producer. They create a lot of angles. You can see my hands and wrists can move very fast, but by hinging them up and down, I can get very steep on this ball. If I do that, I could come down too hot on top of the ball and hit it too far. I'd have to have that angle just right to be able to hit a good shot that way. But if I swing my arm through, keeping the cleats and shallow, I stand a better chance to strike the ball effectively. Instead of having that steep angle coming down where only one spot on that ball would I be able to hit a decent shot with. I'd probably be too steep and top it, or I might even hit behind it. So I don't want to use a lot of hands here. The other part of it is your hands and wrists are your #1 speed producer. They create too much speed. The closer we get to the pin, we're not looking for a lot of speed. We're looking for solid contact. The more shallow my swing gets, the better my contact would be. For example, if I had this tee right here and I said, for $1 million, hit the tee, you wouldn't go like this trying to hit the tee because you'd have such a little surface to hit it with, and that tee is very small, and remember your goal was just to hit it. That would not be the highest percentage way to do it. But if you swung the club back and kept it low through, you couldn't miss it.